speech itself was so sweet. So it was a pleasure, even though I couldn't understand all of it, just the general ideas, but it was a pleasure to listen. And again, it's a pleasure to be able to speak about Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Vivekananda always hesitated to speak about Sri Ramakrishna. So if Swami Vivekananda himself hesitated to speak on Sri Ramakrishna, then we should hesitate 100 times, 1,000 times we should hesitate. At the same time, to speak about Sri Ramakrishna is a great blessing. And so for that reason, I don't hesitate to speak, recognizing that my understanding of Sri Ramakrishna is very, very small. If you look at Swami Vivekananda, his interactions with his brother disciples, he was constantly trying through conversation and through letters that he wrote to them, constantly trying to break all narrow conceptions of Sri Ramakrishna, always trying to expand their understanding of Sri Ramakrishna, always telling them that what you have understood of Sri Ramakrishna may be good for you, but don't think that thereby you have understood Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna is the source of infinite ideas. Infinite ideas. So you're constantly breaking all narrowness about Sri Ramakrishna. So all that we can do is to speak of our understanding of Sri Ramakrishna, recognizing it as the child's attempt to catch the moon. Sri Ramakrishna being the moon of spirituality. So I want to speak mainly about Sri Ramakrishna as the embodiment of all ideals. It's sometimes said that Sri Ram was the pravritti avatar. That is, he was the embodiment of dharma, how to live in the world. The ideal son, the ideal elder brother, the ideal husband, the ideal king, the ideal man. The stamp that Sri Ram gave to India was profound. It's colored the whole of Indian civilization. The stamp that Sri Ram gave through himself, through the image of Sita, through his brother Lakshman and other brothers, through Hanuman. The stamp of Sri Ram on Indian civilization is an extraordinary and enduring stamp. So in the Valmiki Ramayana, we see that Rama was the pravritti avatar, the avatar of dharma. But later in the Tulsi Ramayana, the Adhyatma Ramayana, the Yoga Vashishta Ramayana, there the Rama as the nivritti avatar also was brought forth. So Rama was both pravritti and nivritti avatar. And Sri Krishna, of course, also was both the pravritti and nivritti avatar. That is, the pravritti dharma and nivritti dharma avatar. And the same is true of Sri Ramakrishna. When we think of Sri Ramakrishna, we think of sometimes his renunciation, his deep meditation, his ecstasy. So it seems like he was the nivritti avatar. But no, he taught us how to live in the world also. How to live in the world, how to live a dharmic life, how to follow dharma in detail. You see how carefully he taught the Holy Mother in every detail, how to trim lamps, how to get into a boat and get out of a boat. In details he taught her how to live in the world. So Sri Ramakrishna was not just the nivritti dharma avatara, he was the pravritti dharma avatara as well. But he was much more even than that. We say Sri Ramakrishna is Sarvadevi Devi Swarupa. The offering mantra that you hear in the puja here, Om Sarvadevi Devi Swarupaya Sri Ramakrishnaya Namaha, or in Homa, Swaha. Salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. So he was the embodiment of all gods and goddesses, and actually of that which can't even be included within the gods and goddesses. He was the embodiment of the impersonal path as well, the Parabrahma as well. Swami Abhedanandaji wrote the meditation that we use in the puja for Sri Ramakrishna, and some of us use in practice as well. Hridaya kamala madhye rajitam nirvikalpam sarasara-kila bheda atitam eka swarupam. The first verse describes Sri Ramakrishna as Brahman itself, Nirakara, Nirguna, Brahman, the Absolute. The second verse describes Sri Ramakrishna as Ishvara, Ishvara himself, the Lord of the universe, the Lord of the universe, present in the full presence of Sri Ramakrishna within everything. And the third verse describes Sri Ramakrishna as Ishavatara, the avatar of God. So from Brahma, the Nirakar, Nirgun, to Ishvara, to the Avatara, the embodiment in human form of God. So he is all of that. He's in fact all spiritual ideals. All spiritual ideals. And especially you find in him the harmony of all ideals, as we find in Sri Krishna, who embodied the harmony of all ideals and taught the harmony of all ideals in the Gita. You find in Sri Ramakrishna spontaneously manifested perfect harmony of all spiritual ideals. Holy Mother said that Sri Ramakrishna, to her thinking, Sri Ramakrishna did not start out thinking, let me teach the harmony of spirituality. His hunger for God was so great, he wanted to taste God in all different respects. And so the harmony that Sri Ramakrishna taught was spontaneous, natural, not premeditated. Let me teach the harmony because the world needs a harmony of religions. No, it was a natural result of his love for God. And you find that in Sri Ramakrishna's life, this harmony starts from even before his birth. Before his birth. As you know, his father went to Gaya to make offerings to the ancestors, Pitri. And there he had the vision of Gadadhara, Vishnu, who came to him and said, I want to be born as your son. And around the same time, Sri Ramakrishna's mother, Chandra Devi, was in Kamarpukur, in the village home, and passing in front of the Shiva temple. And there she saw a light coming out of the Shiva Lingam and entering into her. And from that time she felt that she was pregnant. And so Vishnu said, I want to be born as your son. Shiva entered into his mother. And Swami Vivekananda said that Sri Ramakrishna was the incarnation of Kali. So you find from his very inception he was Vishnu, Shiva, Kali, the Divine Mother. And then Sri Ramakrishna's mother, Chandra Devi, when she was pregnant, holding Sri Ramakrishna, she said that countless gods and goddesses, some that she had seen, some she had never seen, as seen in pictures, and some she had never seen or heard of, came to her on a daily basis and offered their worship to her as the mother of Sri Ramakrishna, the mother of the future incarnation. Just imagine that. Gods and goddesses of all types coming every day. She said countless gods and goddesses. Many of them she recognized, many she had never seen. Therefore, my own feeling is that the gods and goddesses that came to pay their respect to Chandra Devi as the mother of the new Avatara included all of the Hindu deities and the deities of other traditions as well, the deities of other nations as well. That the deities of all nations came to pay their respects to Sri Ramakrishna, the Avatara of God himself. The Avatara of the harmony of all spiritual ideals. That from his very inception, before he was even born, he was the embodiment of this harmony. Just as Durga and the Chandi. The Durga was created by the power of all of the different gods coming, the power of each god coming and taking form collectively as Ma Durga. So Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of all of the gods and goddesses coming together in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. So his harmony was visible from before even his birth. And the other quality which was so prominent in Sri Ramakrishna's life, renunciation. It said that when he was born, Dhani, the midwife, lay Sri Ramakrishna down on the floor so that she could attend to the mother before she could come back and wash Sri Ramakrishna off from the birth. And when she came back to attend to Sri Ramakrishna, she found that he had slid into the pit of ashes where the rice was parched. And so his body was covered with ashes, like Shiva himself, covered in the ashes of renunciation. So the embodiment of the harmony of religions and the embodiment of renunciation from his very birth. Such things in the life of someone like Sri Ramakrishna are deeply significant. If a person like me had fallen into the ashes at the time of my birth, people would just say, oh, the poor baby got dirty. But that would be with someone like me. But with Sri Ramakrishna, no. Everything that happened in his life was filled with significance. So Sarva Devi Devi Swarupaya Sri Ramakrishnaya Namaha. As Sri Ramakrishna, some have said that Sri Ramakrishna taught, one of the principal teachings of his was Vyakulata Yoga. Vyakulata Yoga, that is yearning. He followed many different paths in his life, Vaishnava paths, Tantrika paths, Advaita, Yoga, so many different paths, Islam, Christianity. But in the beginning he started purely with Vyakulata. And his first vision of the Divine Mother, profound vision of the Divine Mother, where he was absorbed for 3 days and nights, unconscious of the outer world, came through the power of Vyakulata, showing that through Vyakulata itself we can attain to everything. If we have yearning, then we can attain to everything. So he was the embodiment of Vyakulata as well. So Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of the Hindu gods and goddesses. But he started out with a question. He started out with the question, Mother, are you real? Mother, are you real? That also is significant. He didn't start out by saying that, Mother, I know you're real, now I want to realize you. He started out with the question, are you real, Mother? People say that Ram Prasad and Kamalakanta and other saints in the past, they realized you. But are you just stone or are you real? And so he began with a question, trying to see, is the Divine Mother real? That also is significant to us today, because in the modern world many people have lost faith and they wonder, is God real? Is God real? And especially in India, under the influence of the British education and the attack on Hinduism that came with the British in India, people had begun to lose faith in large numbers in image worship as well. In image worship. They felt that image worship is superstition. And so many reform movements started in India denying image worship, like the Brahmo Samaj and other groups. They began by denying image worship. So Sri Ramakrishna started by saying, oh Mother, are you just stone? Are you just stone? Or are you real? And of course, as we know, in time he came to see that the Mother was not Mrinmoy, but she was Chinmoy, that she was made of pure consciousness. But he saw that the worship of the image, the stone image, led to the realization of the Mother there in the image who was Chinmoy. So he started with the question of, Mother, are you real? And then he became the embodiment of the Divine Mother herself. In time he became the very embodiment of the Divine Mother. As Swami Vivekananda said to Sister Nivedita, I think in future ages people will recognize Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation of Kali. Again, that was not to say that he was not an incarnation of Vishnu, an incarnation of Shiva, an incarnation of all other ideals, but an incarnation of Kali also. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say that in here there are two. Do you understand? Within here there are two. Meaning there's Mother and her devotee. So in Sri Ramakrishna, that also he was a universal being in the sense that he was the Divine Mother, and he was also the devotee of the Divine Mother. He was both in one person, the Divine Mother and her devotee. When people wanted, for instance, if people came to Sri Ramakrishna and said, "Sir, please give me ecstasy," and Sri Ramakrishna would often say, "That will come in time, that will come in time, that will come in time." But they said, "No, sir, I want ecstasy, you please give me." If they continued to bother him, Sri Ramakrishna would finally say, "As the mother wishes." And then people knew that that meant that their wish had been granted, because the one within Sri Ramakrishna was the Divine Mother. So you see in him the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. You see in him the embodiment of the devotee himself or herself. Also you see in him both the masculine nature and the feminine nature. Sri Ramakrishna was not man or woman. He was beyond both, and yet he had both natures. He was both masculine and he was also feminine. He could identify with a womanly nature as well as with manly nature, and yet he was that which was beyond both. Beyond both. And so he was extraordinary in his universality. He was also the embodiment not just of bhakti and the bhakti ideals. He was the embodiment of jnana. If you look at him, look at the meditation picture of him where he is absorbed in the highest state, as he said, that serves as an image of the highest consciousness. So one who wants to follow the path of knowledge also can meditate on Sri Ramakrishna as the embodiment of the highest knowledge. He's the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. He's the embodiment of the highest knowledge as well. He's the embodiment of the devotee, the embodiment of Yakulata that the devotee tries to attain. And as we know, he wasn't satisfied even just with following the paths of the Hindu Dharma. Though he didn't follow the Sikh tradition, at that time Sikhism was considered a part of Hinduism, so there was not a need to follow it as a separate religion. But you find that in his life, that many Sikh devotees used to come to him, and they would say with pride to the other devotees, "He's one of us," in that manly Punjabi way. He's one of us, he's one of our own. That is, claiming him for themselves. In a good way, not in a bad way, in a good way. I think that recognizing that he was one of their own. When Christian devotees came to Sri Ramakrishna, some of them said after spending time with him that I see in Sri Ramakrishna Christ himself. He's Christ himself. Sri Ramakrishna realized in Samadhi the reality of Christ and the beauty of Christian worship as well, and said yes, he saw in a vision worship taking place in a Christian church, and he said yes, this also is a wonderful way of worshiping God, identifying with God. And he realized his identity with Christ. And then he practiced Islam as well. For Islam he actually took a pir who taught him Sufi sadhana, and he practiced the path of the Sufis and had the realization of God through that path as well. Afterwards, there were incidents. One incident I will relate. He was traveling by carriage in Calcutta, and he heard a Sufi singing in ecstasy a song of love to God. And Sri Ramakrishna in the carriage heard it, and he went into ecstasy. And he stopped the carriage and ran out of the carriage and found the saint and embraced him. And the two stood there, both of them in ecstasy, for a long time, just both of them shedding tears of ecstasy. So Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment not just of all of the Hindu ideals, but he was the embodiment of religious ideals outside of Hinduism as well. My own thought is that that's deeply significant. Deeply significant not just for the standpoint of ordinary harmony, but from the standpoint that he realized his identity with Christ, and he identified with the ideal of Islam as well. My belief there is that in time, people of other religions also will find in Sri Ramakrishna their ideal. Not in a narrow way, I don't mean in a sense of conversion and all of that, but those of other traditions also will see in Sri Ramakrishna a common ideal. If that happens, then we'll find that Sri Ramakrishna really established harmony of religions, because people of different religions, seeing a common ideal, will come to recognize their brothers in different traditions. And the different religious traditions will recognize themselves as having a common foundation in experience. There's some Christian ministers who have said that, well, Sri Ramakrishna never practiced Christianity, because to practice Christianity you have to become a member of a church, and you have to give up other identification. He couldn't go back to Hinduism if he practiced Christianity. You have to become a Christian forever. And becoming a Christian means being a member of a church and going to the church and participating in rituals and so forth. And Sri Ramakrishna didn't do any of that. That's true. But my feeling is that Sri Ramakrishna showed the essence of Christianity by the realization of Christ, and through Christ the plunging into the divine, into God, it's the divinity itself. He showed the essence of Christianity, which is the realization of God through Christ. Through his Islamic sadhana, I think he showed the essence of Islam, the realization of Allah, realization of God, coming to the point where he said that through that path also I came to the same realization, to the same God. Through Christianity, the same God. Through different paths of Hinduism, the same God. And so my own belief is that in time that will take on great significance in the world. You see it already in Christianity. In America there are a number of Christian ministers, that is Christian fathers, Catholic nuns and monks and others who have actually taken initiation from our Vedanta Swamis. They still remain Christian, they still teach in the Christian church, they still preach about Christ, but they have taken initiation and look on Sri Ramakrishna as their inspiration. I've known several, but one in particular I'll mention briefly. One, Reverend Andrew Limke. He was a Protestant minister. He told me, I heard this from Reverend Limke himself, that when he retired from his church, where he had preached for many years, then the church tried to find another minister, another pastor, to come to replace him. And they tried many people, and they said, Reverend Limke, we can't find anyone who teaches like you. What is your secret? So he told us, the secret I couldn't tell them, but the secret was I was teaching the principles of Sri Ramakrishna without mentioning Sri Ramakrishna, teaching them in the name of Christ, recognizing that there was a perfect harmony between the two. And the devotees of Christ were so impressed with his teaching after hearing him for many years that they were extremely disappointed they could not find another to replace him. And so that has been repeated many times. Jewish rabbis who are devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. One of my own friends, Rabbi Rami Shapiro, a Jewish rabbi, he's an initiated disciple of the Ramakrishna mission, a special devotee of the Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, and yet a Jewish rabbi. He still remains a Jewish rabbi, teaching Judaism, but with this the devotion to the ideals of Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother. So again, Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of all ideals. It's interesting, Sri Ramakrishna did not practice Buddhism. He never took a Buddhist teacher. My own feeling on that, again, it's just purely my own thinking. I don't claim any great insight. But Sri Ramakrishna left that for Swami Vivekananda. That Swami Vivekananda was the embodiment of the Buddhist ideal. In fact, Swami Vivekananda can be seen as the new Buddha, as Buddha himself, come again in the form of Swami Vivekananda. And so that was left for Swami Vivekananda, to bring Buddhism also within the ideal that Sri Ramakrishna set. But it's also true that Sri Ramakrishna, when he was in Dakshineshwar, and Swami Vivekananda Narendra, and Kali, who became Swami Abhedananji, they went, and others went to Bodh Gaya and meditated on Buddha. When they came back, Swami Vivekananda, Narendra, said to Sri Ramakrishna about Buddha's teaching that he didn't believe in God, he didn't teach about God and everything, and Sri Ramakrishna said, no, Buddha was not an atheist. Well, what he experienced couldn't be expressed in words. What he experienced couldn't be expressed in words, and therefore he didn't speak in terms of God. If you study Buddhism, you'll find that that's true. You'll see that that rings true with the... So Sri Ramakrishna, who never studied Buddhism, he never took a Buddhist teacher, he had not read Buddhist scriptures. People used to read the Bible to him, but Buddhism, he had not heard teachings of Buddhism, and yet he went right to the heart of it and understood the essence of the Buddha's experience without even having studied it or practiced it. And so that ideal also was present in Sri Ramakrishna. So all of these... Now before I conclude, let me just mention that Sri Ramakrishna, as Swami Vivekananda said, he lived the whole history of Indian spirituality in his short life, from Vedic times to the present. He lived the whole history of Indian spirituality in his life. He lived the essence of Christianity, the essence of Islam. He was identified with the Sikh tradition, and he understood the essence of Buddhism, and through Swami Vivekananda, that also he lived. He also showed in his life the truth of the myths of Hinduism, as well as the myths of other religions. He showed the truth of the rituals. When Sri Ramakrishna did puja, and puja, there's a place where we take water and sprinkle it around, rum, 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 with building a wall of fire around ourselves. We imagine that we're surrounded by a wall of fire before we do the Bhuta Shuddhi. When Sri Ramakrishna did it, he actually saw a wall of fire. There's another place in the puja where we take water and sprinkle it on all of the vessels and the instruments and say vam 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 vam, and then amrita karana, we do the Dhenu mudra over it to think that everything is covered with nectar. When Sri Ramakrishna did it, he saw all of the vessels as pure consciousness itself. Everything is made of pure consciousness. So that which we do with imagination in order to help us in our sadhana, he realized the truth of it. So in myth, in ritual, and finally, I'll close with saying that he also, as I said, was the Dharma avatar. He showed the essence of Dharma. We have the idea in Hinduism of Satyam Jnanam, no, not Satyam Jnanam, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. The God is of the nature of Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Satyam truth, Shivam goodness, Sundaram beauty. You know that the ancient Greeks, they said that the three highest human ideals are truth, goodness, and beauty. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, you see that he was the avatar of Satyam. Truth in spiritual truth, and truth in speech as well. He was the embodiment of truth itself. He couldn't utter a falsehood. And he always wanted to know the truth of everything. In that he was very scientific. He wanted to know the truth of things. He wouldn't accept anything unless he knew the truth of it. He was the very embodiment of truth. He was also the embodiment of goodness. The embodiment of goodness. The embodiment, what does goodness mean? The essence of goodness is unselfishness. The essence of goodness is love for all beings. Sri Ramakrishna would go into ecstasy seeing a crowd of people. So Sri Ramakrishna was the essence of goodness, unselfishness, love for all. And he was the embodiment of Sundaram, the embodiment of beauty itself. Sri Swami Saradananda describes the ecstatic dance of Sri Ramakrishna, which was the very image of beauty. Sri Ramakrishna was an artist. He had the skill of making beautiful images and drawing and sculpting and so forth. He had the art of acting as well. And that also, he was the embodiment of beauty. In everything Sri Ramakrishna did, he did it with beauty. If you read the Kotamrita, Vajanamrit, you see that every word of his is filled with beauty, filled with truth, filled with goodness, filled with beauty. So Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of human ideals as well as divine ideals. So with that, let me bring it to a close. And